Hello, this is Kara from Kara Tarot with a VR to Darling Mervat at Egyptian Mystic. Hashtag favorite art decks. Pardon me, I've been having a lot of trouble with my asthma, so I may be coughing, and if you've been watching me recently, you've noticed more of that. Now this hashtag is right up my alley. A lot of you will know that I have a whole devoted section in my cards to art decks devoted to the works of artists, of great artists. So I have and also to literary people. But, so I knew I needed to create some parameters, and the thing is that really all of my decks I consider to be art decks of one kind or another. So I really had to create some boundaries for myself. So my favorite decks are all collage, but one of my first ground rules was that it had to be all of a piece, all not necessarily all hand created, but mostly, and it had to all be original art, all created for this, all created at once. Now, collage has become so important in tarot decks that there are now art decks that are hand painted, that are created to look like collage or to approximate collage. I don't think I had any of those in this though. And so to no alterations, as in, so let me say, back up, collage. Even my favorite Salvador Dali deck, which was not created the way collage decks are created today, but it still was collage. He utilized older artworks in with his modern artworks. So that was out. So to all of my beloved collage creators, don't be hurt because you're in the same category as Salvador Dali. My second category was no alteration, as in some of my other favorite decks. So like the books, the Bosch Tarot. Sorry, getting my harpists and my painters confused. The Nicholas Boxa was a great harpist. The Bosch Tarot utilizes his artwork, but it adds things for consistency of the suit elements. There are other decks that do the same thing. Even the William Blake Tarot, I had to look it up, it doesn't alter his artwork to add wands or swords or something, but what it does is it uses elements from two different drawings of his and may collage them together, which I didn't know until I was doing a little research before I put this group together. So the William Blake Tarot was out too, even though it was initially on my list. And so number three, by taking those two things out, it meant that this original artwork had to be intended to be a tarot deck, or it had to be not altered. And you will see one of my decks is illustration work that is not altered. They didn't add the suit elements into it. They just used the pictures as they were first done. So I debated with myself about the use of computer. And for the most part, I have the decks do not. Some of them I don't know whether they were done by hand or whether they were done by computer. And so that was a little more amorphous. It's really hard to determine. And today, it's impossible to print a deck without the use of computer. So my goal was to choose decks that had that were all original artwork and paintings. Some of them are works that are done by artists that work on computer now because um, some artists, that's how they work now, from scratch. So let's get started. And my final question for myself before I started was whether I would use um, decks that were recreations of historic decks. And so this became a difficult place because it brings in a lot of these issues of collage elements, or even if a deck like some of the really early decks have recreations of just one or two cards. But those recreations can use collage elements from, say, the background of those cards. And then they'll do their artwork on top of it. So where I drew the line for that, and of course that really opened up the floodgates on my older decks, was that I wanted it to be a recreation deck that, again, was of a piece. It didn't have replacements, and it didn't have... some of them are more highly edited and produced, like a lot of the Lo Scarabeo versions of decks, like one of my favorites, um, it is the classic tarot by Lo Scarabeo, which is a more highly edited version of the Soprafino. And while I love it, I don't know, it's hard to know how much of that was altered or shaped or fit. So it kind of reduced it to really handmade historic decks. So those were all of my parameters. And those were mainly just, again, not to say that I don't adore those decks, and some of them may be more favorites than anything that I have here. I also wanted to kind of eliminate some that I had shown a lot recently in other videos. But that I didn't need to worry about as much, because once I narrowed down, I'd say I had about 40 decks that I would consider just art decks that would fit either in this category or close to this category. Some of them that I didn't know were collage. I looked them up, and they do have collage elements. Oh, and I will say no AI. Let's just get that out there. No AI, but then I am generally a no AI person. I think I have one or two that has a couple AI elements admitted to in their creation. So once I had my list of close to 40, then I wanted to narrow it down to 10 for this hashtag. So here we go. And we start with the Tarocchi Minchiate di Bomarzo. Now, if you know anything about Amparo Aguirre, she started with a recreation deck of a deck that was given to her by her, I think her grandmother. So that deck would have been out of the running, but because she created this deck, here we are. This is a Minchiate deck. I did a month-long focus on this deck, a deep dive month. And it's just bright, it's colorful. she's true to the original elements of the deck, true to the original signs, and yet these are her own representations and drawings and colorings. Now, this is one of the ones I'm fairly certain she would have worked on a computer to recreate these. Now, when I looked this up online, oh no, it was a different one. Never mind. Scratch that. So these are all of her artwork and her fanciful colors and lovely changes like plants growing out of the cups. For me, this is a smaller deck because it's smaller than tarot size. The gilding is a lovely kind of bronze shade, copper shade. And I tremendously enjoy working with this whenever it comes up. And a shout out to Pipspeak Tarot, which was bright, colorful, traditional TDM deck. It made it up high on my list. It just didn't make it quite here. A completely different art form now. This is one I have shown recently, is the Craft Felt Tarot. For several years, this was one of a kind. It has recently been another felt artwork deck, but I love the graphic quality of this. The fact that she hand cut and pieced all of these together, and they're photographed so well that you can really see the depth of the different felt layers in these cards. And it's completely true to the original Rider-Waite-Smith, and still makes those diversity changes, and updates it, and then in this really fun and unique style. So easy to read with, and yet just unique. And all of these little things cut out by hand. This is craft. I think craft is the operative word here. Craft in the very best sense. The Craft Felt Tarot. Oh, and by the way, these are not in any particular order other than alphabetical, because I could not make a choice to make them, most favorite to least favorite. So these are all just 10 favorite. Now, here's one that helped create some of my definitions in this deck, is the Edmund Dulac Tarot. Now, this is an illustrator deck, but there are no changes made to the artwork. It does not have elements collaged in. Those things are just added in the borders, which suit it is and what the card is, so that the illustrations themselves are the actual illustrations that were done for particular stories. And I regularly say this may be my most, nudity. It may be my most beautiful art deck. And perhaps one of my most beautiful decks. Now, some of you know I'm working with the Botticelli Tarot this week, but the Botticelli Tarot, as gorgeous as it is, it did use collage or whatever to put in the elements. They added pentacles into the paintings, or they added wands into, or swords, so that they are, you know, it's not the original illustration. It has been modified. And that was one of the ways I created that distinction for this hashtag. And I will say, this whole hashtag brings up something that I love to talk about and think about as someone who has worked in the arts, which is, and it's the title of a film that I think you can find on YouTube, Who Gets to Call It Art? There are wonderful films about the art world, and who gets to determine that it's art or trash or not very good. And it has to do with the workings of the art world itself. Now, this one I know is from an illustration from the Snow Queen, because this is the point at which she goes to the old lady's house with the garden. I just wish, Lo Scarabeo, I wish you would do large versions of all of these illustrator decks. These famous illustrator decks could really benefit by being larger. There's so much beautiful detail in the artwork. So anyway, I was saying there is also an Orson Welles film called, I think the film itself technically has no title, but that's about art. Although we have a lot of his middle-age crisis libido on display in that film too. But it's about an art forger who then became famous, and a lot of his forgeries, he claims, are actually in museums, labeled as the real thing. And then there's another film called Missing Viktor Pellerin, which is about, again, about the art world. And having worked in the arts my entire adult life, and I worked with a performance artist, John Antone, who you can look him up. He did the sets for a play that I was in, and then he reminded me a lot of my brother, so I sought him out and to speak to him, and he's a very withdrawn person. And then he asked me to do a performance art piece that we toured with minimally. We toured some museums with that piece. So that was always, so being the art world and the art scene, and then I also took, I'm also an artist and illustrator as well, although I haven't done much of that in the past few years. All of those things have been a part of my world and my thought process. The Feng Shui Tarot. Looking for the Peter Paul Connolly did the illustrations of this. This is an out-of-print deck. I have shown this before. This was when I went for many, many years owning only 3 decks. This was one of them. It has a suit discrepancy issue in the guidebook, and I think that's one of the reasons it's out of print. And those, I have both the small guidebook and the large guidebook. And both of them have internal discrepancies as to whether the phoenixes are fire or water. They confused fire and water. And the same with the tortoises. Some places it says fire, some places it says water. Well, and then the descriptions have the phoenix as water and the descriptions have the tortoises as fire. And that makes no sense at all. So once I figured out what was wrong, I was able to read with this deck. But regardless, the artwork is just incredible. I have said I made some mistakes and smudges when I was edging this, one of the few decks that I've edged, but I don't mind it. I actually somebody told me there's a way to take that off, but I don't mind it. It kind of, to me, adds to the patina. And this is a deck I'm not going to get rid of. This is a seminal, foundational deck for me, and I adore the artwork. I have read one comment somewhere that there's some cultural confusion in this deck between Chinese and Japanese. Just a beautiful, beautiful deck. The artwork of Peter Paul Connolly. Oh, before I go too far, let me go back and make sure I name the artists for these decks, since that's what this is about. Amparo Aguirre is the artist for this deck. She has her name on one of the cards, but she forgot to put her name on any of the external packaging. Of course, Edmund Dulac and Gianna Lucci is the artist of this deck. Next is a deck that won't surprise any of you. This was in my top 5 decks last year. The Forager's Daughter Tarot. And of course, her name isn't on the deck. It's on the book. I think Jessica Lee Howard. I'm pretty sure that's her name. There's nature-based, just from the Art Nouveau inspired borders to these wonderful combinations of traditional Rider-Waite Smith symbols, animals, crystals, herbs, woodland elements. It's just incredible. And truly an art deck, I think all of the majors are available from her as poster prints, and they are print worthy. I do read reversals with this deck, so some of these are upside down. The moon, this is definitely one of her art prints. The things like the Three of Cups, they're so beautiful. The Ten of Swords. The Queen of Pentacles on her nest. Just so many different representations of the suit illustration. The Eight of Pentacles. And then she has 2 additional cards, the Empress, the Star, the King of Cups, the Hierophant, and Dragonflies, the Lovers. Just again, this was one of my top 5 decks of last year. It's probably still up there. The book is every bit as inventive and beautifully produced as the deck. I personally wouldn't want this deck without the book because it's far enough away from Rider-Waite-Smith that there are questions. It's just you're missing so much in this deck if you don't get the book, because she clearly knows her stuff, as well as just her beautiful artistry, and together it's really powerful. Next is the Japaridze Tarot. I almost didn't get this because when I first saw this representation and I looked, this face is kind of blurred out, I thought it was an AI deck. But then I did some reading and I found out, no, these were all surreal artworks created by Nino Japaridze. She first did the majors and had a gallery show with the majors because these were full-size paintings. She was, at this time, one of the few female artists in the world, one of the few living artists who happens to be female in the world, who was still working in surrealism. I think a couple of these more geometric ones, is a direction that she's gone more in since the completion of this deck. One of my favorite cards in every deck, the Nine of Gardens, and just look at this. And it does have the influence of collage style as well, but these are all actual paintings. See, if you didn't know, you might think that was collage. And so that it can be hard to tell. She has so many influences in her artwork, and just the color, the variety. And see, we go from all that color to a card like this. So with this deck, you can definitely read by color, which is something I also like to add into my readings, because you have decks with just an absence of color, or just a wash of color, or extreme depth of color. She has the full range. All of the aces are like this, much more modern art. And again, this would be another card that if I didn't know this was an actual painting, I might have thought that was AI. We can't see her hands well. Her feet are just kind of shapes, and the face is blurred. But no, these are all original artworks. Any deck that includes musical performances is going to have my heart. That would be the Hanged Man. Marionettes, another love of mine. So the Japaridze Tarot, again, an artist depicting the creation of art. The Three of Gardens. That really says it all for me, for why I love this deck so much. I edged it in orange because there's a trace hint of orange, and there's a lot of orange and red in the face. And then I realized, no, there isn't any orange here, except maybe a blush of it. And then I thought of redoing it, and then I thought, no, well, no, it kind of goes with the whole here. As I said, I don't usually edge decks, and that's probably why that I would rethink it afterwards and not be satisfied with the color. But I actually got it out to redo it, and then I looked at it again. I said, no, I like that I chose that. So now the Muse Cat, as you know, one of my very favorite decks by Kim Da-jung. Now, we get into another category here. Oh, and this is one with a box within a box. Kim Da-jung is a computer artist. She works only on, I'm fairly certain it's a woman because I follow her on Instagram. All of these created on computer, so they aren't hand drawings, but she has shown enough of her process that these are hand drawings done on computer. So you can go to her Instagram and see her process. So these are her artwork. There's no collage in there. It's just that her medium is on the computer screen. Most of you have heard me rave and wax poetic about this deck. Here's the black and the gold are 2 additional cards in this deck. And at first I thought they were kind of like yes or no, because the guidebook is only in Korean. And she said not only do they not have any intention of producing this in English, the final printing of this is, they have only a very few copies left. It's Pinkoi, P as in Peter, INKOI.com. And so it is about to go out of print. She says, knowing that this is her favorite deck and wondering if she should get a second copy. This is always in my favorites. I love all of her representations. I love her choices and the expression of the cats. And it's incredibly faithful to the original Rider-Waite-Smith imagery. She has a lot of different other kinds of card decks. And, oh, this is last, so that's perfect. I want to talk about this image. This is the Wheel of Fortune. And it looks like a wristwatch to me. And I love that aspect of this card, is that so that it includes the element of time and youth and death. And so all of these elements get combined into this marvelous Wheel of Fortune card. And the most beautiful backs, this is about to appear in another video because the most beautiful backs of any deck that I have. The Muse Cat Tarot. And as I said, not only does it have a box within a box, you can get a metal box for these cards. Now I have a controversial choice. It may feel obvious to some. It may feel controversial to others. This is my newest edition of this, and it was really inexpensive. I think it was on Etsy, but it was only $26. And I did not have the Rider-Waite Smith with black borders. So that's the backs. It is an inexpensive deck, and it kind of, I mean, it's fine, but it feels it. It's just kind of everything about it is kind of regular presentation, regular gloss. But I ask you, instead of flipping by, I ask you to appreciate the artistry of Pamela Coleman Smith. Remembering that this whole world, for the most part, this whole world of regularly produced tarot cards did not exist. Now, some of these, the manner that one's pixelated in the background. So again, it was an inexpensive deck. But it's pixelated. But this is one of the reasons I love to do historic theater, as I really try to remember when I'm doing Shakespeare or playing historic music, or playing Debussy. I try to remember what it must have felt like to be the person who had never heard that before. To be the person who had never seen this artwork before. And how laden it is with meaning. And then as I am reading The Secrets of the Rider-Waite Smith, to layer in something that, now that I know it, I can't unsee it, is that most of these were done like stage sets because of the great influence the theater had on her. And also the printing of this back kind of comes through on the front. So it was a really inexpensive deck, but I wanted to have a version with the black borders because I just think it ties in with her black ink so well. And we're so used to these images. Now I want to stop and pick a bone here. Everybody talks about this being the red. It's not red. She has red in other cards. And it's not just this printing. If you go and you look in other cards, she has the color red. The Flag in the Sun card is orange, which makes total sense. Here, she has red. Red, orange. Red. So know that moving forward. Red. Red. It's actually that color in the sun is actually a little closer to this browny orange in the wands. Here, the background here is the color of that flag as opposed to the red. I've made my point, but anyway, the staginess of it. See that? You can almost see the edge of the stage and where the backdrop of the stage begins. So the theatrical influences. Just think of all of the elements that he wanted her to include in her artwork, and no one had done it before. Or no one anywhere near their time period had done it before, to try to do these drawings and incorporate the things that he wanted and then incorporate the influences of things she had seen in museums, like the Solabusca that we're pretty sure she saw. just incredible artistry of Pamela Coleman Smith. And so I just, even if you're somebody who feels like, oh, I don't connect with that deck, it is of its time in terms of style. But I wanted us all to just take a moment and really just appreciate her if we're talking about art. And now to something completely different. I have shown this just recently, and I've worked with it recently. The Dream Dust, I know, Dream Dust, but I just call this the Shamanic Tarot when I'm referring to it myself. This is the work of Sue Sparrow Bellamy. Very, very large cards, out of order now. All of them modern art. Fascinating to read with. Because instead of having a clear image to kind of tell you visually what to think, you have to dive in. You have to suspend. It gives you words. So you have those words in your mind, and then you just dive into this artwork and see all the different layers of things that your mind's eye tells you to see. It really is art interpretation at its finest. Someone compared this deck to the, I'm going to get the name wrong, Margaret Pearson deck, which is also modern art. Not quite this abstract. This is very abstract, and that's one of the things I loved about it. It is so extremely abstract that I knew I would be pushing myself into this artwork and seeing things in this artwork that would have to be seen with my inner eye. And then the large size. I love large cards. And this is, I think, for this kind of thing where you're going to be diving into it, the larger the better. Glossy. I guess it's semi-gloss. It's one of the higher gloss decks that I have. So part of what I wanted to do is try to represent a lot of different genres of art in this, but when I got down to the ones that really stood out for me, it was not a difficult it was not a difficult selection process. Although, as I said, almost all of my most favorite decks aren't here because by not using collage, I wiped out that. And that was just a decision to narrow things down. And you see collage decks in my channel all the time and share the love of them. And finally, Naibi to Giovanni Vacchetta. As I said, I don't have an original of the Soprafino. I have the Lo Scarabeo version, so I don't know how altered it is. This is Il Meneghello's handmade version, hand-colored version of the Giovanni Vacchetta. I just showed it in another video recently. This again, for me, is another contender for the most beautiful deck that I own. Certainly of this style, one of the most beautiful decks of illustration and hand-colored. This is, some of the cards are not here because I'm working with this deck right now. This is the deck I'm using for my daily scripture card right now. These are from 1893. So not very long before Pamela Coleman Smith began work on hers. So something like this might have been more readily available to her. So there they are. My 10 favorite art decks. Quite different in their styles. I thank Mervat for creating this hashtag because goodness knows we need more beauty in the world right now. Thanks for spending time with me. Have a lovely day.